basis for the crime. It was my belief that Judge Shannon knew that something crooked was going on. He didn't want to be a part of it. This is my educated guess. Because approximately 30 days after sentencing me, he quit. The man was in his 40s and appeared to be in very good health to me, and went to work in a private law firm. Now, I've never talked to the judge. I don't know exactly what went on, but you can conclude for yourself from the facts what may have happened. I later tried to call the press in. I was up in the newspaper, and the newspaperman said that there was obviously some sort of a cover-up because there was a lot of whispering in front of the bench out of the earshot of the public. Now, the Sixth Amendment says you're supposed to have a speedy and a public trial. When I attempted to talk to the press, I was moved around from prison to prison. Finally, when the press found me and were making attempts to come in and see me, the warden at Bastrop Prison and the captain came to me and told me that there was a murder contract out on me and that I had to go to the hole. That's solitary confinement for my own protection. The warden explained to me that he had a career and he didn't know what I'd done or who I was involved with, but he wasn't going to lose one of his prisoners and have his career ruined. This happened in 1984 or 83, I'm not sure which. Incidentally, this warden in 1994 had been demoted to a common guard at Springfield Prison and was just awaiting his retirement. Now again, I don't know why he was demoted. All I know is that he was demoted. Later, my attorney that had exposed my logbook, Tex McConaughey, had a nervous breakdown and has never practiced law since then. I don't know why he had the nervous breakdown. All I know is the facts that he did have one, and he's not practiced law. Incidentally, I stayed in the hole for 90 days, and then I was let out of the hole and went back in front of a different judge, Hippolito Garcia, and I was offered a chance to have a new trial or plead guilty. Having no information, having my family threatened with murder, having my body put in a hole for 90 days, I decided that the best thing to do would be plead guilty a second time and not make any waves. When you're not allowed to make bond, when all your documents, all your information is destroyed, and when your life's on the line, you don't put up a very good fight in court. After release from prison in 1986, I stayed in prison approximately 3 years. I was coming up on my 5-year date of being out of prison without being arrested. Normally, you should get off a federal parole if you've been 5 years without being arrested or violating your parole. Because of my criminal record, I was unable to secure meaningful employment, so I was washing airplanes as a living. I phoned my parole officer, a Mrs. Barron out of Arlington, and told her secretary that I was going to Austin. Her secretary advised me to come in and get a permit. I was remiss, and I didn't go in and get the permit. I went to Austin anyway. While down there and while washing planes, I was approached by Robert Nestor for the Department of Public Safety air smuggling detail. Since he had been protecting me on my arms and drugs flights from the early 80s, I knew him well. And in fact, I was planning on going into the Noriega trial and explaining to the jury about the cocaine, drug smuggling, arms smuggling operation out of Panama and Bolivia and Nicaragua into Texas, and how Nesterov was protecting these drug flights. So, to make a long story short, Nesterov and his friends showed up, arrested me and two other gentlemen. I'm sorry, Nesterov and his fellow DPS officers took me to jail along with two other men without arresting us. They searched the plane, they searched several cars, they searched several houses, and the next morning they returned to jail and said, "Let them go. We can't find any laws they've broken." So I started to walk out of jail, and they said, "No, hold this guy because we're going to get his parole violated for being in Austin without a permission from his parole officer." I told these DPS officers, including Nesterov, that that was not their job, that it was my understanding that if there was a violation, I'd deal with my parole officer. And since they didn't have an arrest warrant, that I'd just leave and go back to Dallas and talk to my parole officer. Well, they didn't like that idea, so they put me in jail, again without arresting me. They held me until the next day, and then they did get an arrest warrant. It's kind of, I think it's called getting the cart before the horse. Then, 90 days later, they took me into the back room of Bastrop Prison near Austin without an attorney, without the public being present, and I was charged with being out of bounds, and I pled guilty to being out of bounds because I technically did not get the written permit, even though the parole officer knew where I was. The penalty for this was 60 days. When I left the room, I kind of felt that these parole commissioners were up to something. 5 minutes later, when I came back, they told me they had made up an additional charge of smuggling drugs in a conspiracy utilizing my flying ability, and that this activity was similar to my previous activity, and instead of 60 days with good time, I should get 20 months with no good time. I protested that, and I have it on tape, that Nesterov was a liar, a drug smuggler, and that he was getting to me to keep me from testifying in the Noriega trial. They said that that didn't matter to them. Later, I appealed this conviction, and I asked for the specific drug that I was smuggling, the country I was smuggling it from, to, and through. I asked for the names of the co-conspirators. I asked for the specific airplane, and I wanted to know when I did it. The parole commission said that my conviction was affirmed because I failed to convince them in my appeal that I was not doing what I was accused of. Now, I'm not a rocket scientist, but this seemed like to me it was an Orwellian thought crime. I don't know what else it could be. At this point, I wrote a lot of information about the drug and arms flights that I had made and that I knew about, and about the political involvement of CIA and Noriega in drug smuggling, the Bolivian Paraguayan connection. And I actually I wrote it and I gave it to a trustee who said he could smuggle it out of prison and mail it from a post office box on a golf course where he worked as a cleanup man. Apparently this letter did arrive to Joe Miranda in Austin, Texas. I called Joe on the monitored prison phone and learned that he had received the letter. And in discussing it, I think Frank Rubino, Noriega's lawyer, came up. That was who he was supposed to turn this information over to, and also the press. Shortly thereafter, the police, I think it was the DEA, raided Joe Miranda's house with a search warrant. No drugs, no money was found, no evidence of drug smuggling was found, but these papers were taken.